Hello, and welcome back to another podcast from KociStudios.com. Another reminder, if you haven't got your 10 steps to becoming a master storyteller, you can sign up, get the PDF download for free on the website. Today's podcast is called Shut Up and Shoot, a quick start guide to better mobile photography. And it's more about, hopefully, when I shut up, I will have inspired you to go out and shoot with your mobile phone. So today, what to expect. Keep an open mind. I want you to keep an open mind because some of you out there might be sitting there going, my mobile phone, it's really a phone. It's not a serious tool for photography. And I'm here to try and convince you or open your mind otherwise that it can be an extremely powerful tool for telling stories. Remember, this is just about storytelling. It's a lot less about the particular tool that we choose, and certain tools are better for capturing and creating particular moments and events than others, but keep an open mind to the power of mobile photography. We'll be focusing on the idea that it's all about the light, and that transcends any tool, right? That's all about visual storytelling, is all about the light. We'll talk about a little concept that I call zoom with your feet. We will talk about controlling exposure and focus separately and how important that is in mobile photography. We'll talk about silencing some of the inner critics. I'll explain what I mean about that. We'll also talk about what I think is a secret to strong mobile storytelling. I think a secret to all visual storytelling on the web. I'll give you a few tips on the power of observation and how that is oftentimes a better skill to hone than worrying too much about things like f-stops and shutter speeds. While those are important, I think the power of observation will get you a lot further along in growing as a visual storyteller. We're going to talk about forgetting the filters just a little bit, shooting from and for the heart. I'll talk a little bit about what that is. And to wrap up, we'll talk about setting goals, deadlines, and something I call study time, and a few tips on how to always be ready. So that's a lot. Let's get started. All right, so let's talk about the idea of an open heart and the idea of not worrying about the tools. While this is some tips and tricks that I've learned about using this particular tool, it could be a brand new hammer or a wrench, and it's not really about that. It's about what we do with that tool, right? It's really about our eye and our intention and our heart, right? As artists, as creators, as visual storytellers, that's the most important thing. What is our vision? What are we trying to capture? And why do we want to do that? That's the heart part of it, right? So let's try and not focus too much on the idea of the tool. Let's focus more on the idea of photography and painting with light. Okay. First of all, mobile photography is hard. It's not as easy as point and shoot and you capture a good image. You throw a filter on it, and all of a sudden it becomes magic. It takes practice and skill and knowledge of not only the tool, but of the basics of photography and storytelling. And those are some of the things I want to share with you today. So, a lot of people think it's just easy, like the commercial. I'm just going to hold up my mobile device, my point and shoot, and just tap and snap, and it's going to look wonderful. It's not going to look wonderful. You really have to think about some of the core things that make a good photograph, and we're going to start talking about those. Let's not forget that no matter the technological advancements that technology, devices, and all those things make, the most important thing is that the eye survives. That's what survives, our vision. So this podcast is really about sharpening our vision so that we can tell stories that are inside us, so that when the next photographic resolution resolution and revolution, those things tend to change and happen, present itself, we'll be ready. I think that one of my favorite photographers said it best. Ansel Adams in 1983 said that he trusted that the creative eye would continue to grow and function whatever technological innovations may develop. And I firmly believe in that. So let's focus on the major point, the major ingredient to great photography, be it mobile or another tool, but specifically mobile. It's all about the light. It's all about capturing the light, and it's all about making proper exposures. I absolutely love this quote by George Eastman, arguably the father of photography, especially modern photography. Not so much anymore now that they're bankrupt. But anyway, that's another podcast, I guess. This quote about light makes photography. Embrace the light, admire it, love it. And here comes the kicker. But above all, know light. Know it for all you are worth, and you will know the key to photography. That is my favorite photographic quote of all time. It rings true now, and it will ring true forever, no matter what changes, right? So know it for all of its worth. How do you know light? How do you know it? How do we know anything? We study it, right? And this is one thing you really can't go to a book for, which I love. If you want to know about light for all that you are worth, as Mr. Eastman says, you really have to take time out of your day to just look at the light and study the light, right? So that's my first challenge to you. It can be the bowl of grapes on your kitchen table and just noticing the light at different times of the day. Oh, that's the light on the bowl of grapes at breakfast. When you come back for lunch, or maybe you come home, oh, that's the light on that bowl of grapes in the evening, or that's the light at midnight when it's only the light of the kitchen lights and no natural light. Knowing things like that. I mean, I have sat in places and just watched and looked at the play of light on objects. I've walked around them 360. Whatever way works for you, but observe light and think about light and look at shadows and think, oh, well, that's where the sun is. This is where I'm standing. What happens if I stand here or move here? What happens if I move the bowl of grapes from my table a little bit closer to the window? How does the quality of light change? I think all of those powers of observation really trump technical proficiency. I think technical proficiency is highly overrated in terms of feeling like you have to know every little shutter speed and f-stop and codec and JPEG and RAW. All of those things as photographers we tend to get caught up in, and we don't talk a lot about just how powerful honing our sense of observation is. So let's do that with light. I've sat in one place in my house all day and watched the quality of light change over a day. And while that sounds a bit over the top and potentially a little bit obsessive, it's a powerful tool to do. And I didn't waste my time either, because I also learned to shoot a time lapse at the same time. So there's the quality of light moving through our living room over a couple of hours. Not only did I learn to create a time lapse on my iPhone, I watched the quality of light and had my power of observation really tuned to how things work. So find ways to practice with light. So let's get a little bit more down in the mud, if you will, about the idea of exposure on the iPhone. The first thing I would suggest you do as a tip, as a trick to making better photographs and thinking about light and exposure with your mobile device. And again, this isn't all about iPhone. There's, this applies to all. I shoot mostly with an iPhone. I do have an Android device and a Windows phone. So I know that these ideas that I'm transmitting really transcend all of mobile photography. So what you want to do is get the proper exposure for the light. And one of the best ways to do that is to lock your exposure or your focus when you're taking a picture. Here's an image right out of the camera, raw. This is what the camera saw and the camera recorded without me taking control over the exposure. Now, the frame here is really about 50-50 if you go into it, meaning the line in the middle of this image down towards the street was pretty much the shadow and the shade. And what was above that line was a reflection of light, right, coming from a building behind me. And that's what drew me to this situation on the street. But what the camera sees and does is it basically sees the scene and averages all of the light, so that if you just opened any mobile phone, pointed it at this scene, this is what you would get. Now, when I talk about exposure and controlling your exposure, this is what I'm talking about. You want to now, knowing what the camera does, because you've observed this, you heard it on this podcast, and you've gone out and you've seen it yourself, you would want to control the exposure and get the best exposure you could for this scene. Because all of those, what we call blown out or highlights, right? The part that's above the line that goes through the middle of the photo, there's no detail in there. So what you'd want to do on an iPhone is launch your camera app, and if you're using the default camera app, you can, in one tap on the screen, tap and hold an area, and I'll show you what that would look like, and you get an AEAF lock. Now, the moment you do that, it locks the focus and exposure on wherever you happen to tap on the screen. And look how that changes the quality of the light now. This is almost a completely different photographic universe the moment you do that. Now the exposure, you told the camera, expose for the light on that wall, right? In essence, that's my story. That's my subject, right? It's not really the person in this case, because I'm painting with light. And that's what I want exposed. That's what my mind's eye saw when I saw this scene, right? Great. Right? Already a better picture by controlling your exposure. But in some cases, you want to control your exposure, but is that where I want my focus to be? Not really. I'd like my focus to be on the subject or the person walking in the street, but I would like my exposure there on the back wall. So if you find a camera replacement app like Pro Camera, Camera Plus, there's a lot of them for the iPhone. You can separate your exposure and your autofocus into two separate buttons, and it ends up looking something like this. So you can drag your exposure button to where you want exposure, and you can drag your focus to where you want focus. It will lock both of those. You can wait there all day, wait for 1 million people to pass, wait for a gentleman in a hat to come by, and boom, you've got the picture. You've taken control over the exposure, right? If you're not on an iPhone, all Android apps, down in the menu system of whichever app it is, some will actually show your exposure compensation on the display screen when you're shooting the image. A way for you to achieve this on an Android is to find the exposure compensation in your app's menu, and just drag that down. And what you're essentially doing is you're underexposing this scene by 2 stops under. Again, technical proficiency, we don't need to go in that. Let's just assume you just took the button and you slided it to the negative. You're going to see the change, right? It's your observations that you're making that are, for me, more important when you are trying to tell stories with imagery. Of course, this works in any scene, anywhere, so I encourage you to get in there and play around with your exposure sliders. Okay, and oh, hey, look, there's the picture I waited for and ended up for. Okay, here's one quick situation. Here's my camera pointed. This is the airport, I believe, in Phoenix. And if I pulled my camera out of my pocket. In fact, it was already in my hand. I'm always ready to shoot, and shot this scene really quick. Well, look, the camera doesn't know what to do. This is direct sunlight, low in the evening, low on the horizon, shooting through this bank of windows, falling on the subject, and there's a lot of darkness. So it's a high contrast scene. And this is what the camera would see and expose for. So using that little trick I just showed you, I pulled out my auto focus and auto exposure points. I set them, and the moment I set them, I was able to stand here and shoot away at my heart's content with the light locked to the proper exposure and my focus locked right around where people are walking. The next frame, this is what that exact same scene looks like because I'm exposing just for those highlights, just for that streak of light so I could let people pass all day and they're going to be properly exposed. The dark areas will go dark, and where I set my exposure, much like the previous example on the wall, those things are going to be in focus. And you can see that happening here as I kind of panned to the left as this gentleman walked by. Okay, here is another example, a quick little video, probably the hardest situation for any photographer in no matter what tool you're using or the circumstances. No camera, $5,000, $10,000, $1,000, $10 can get this scene right. And that is my dog Vincent, a black lab, laying on his pad with a window as a background. That is a tough situation to get an image of, especially if your camera's on auto. So here's a live, somewhat live, taped demo of what of that situation in action, basically. So here we go. I've launched my application. I'm dragging around my exposure. So if I wanted to expose for the window, you can see that, or the couch, it would open it up a bit, or down towards Vincent, right? Which in this case, he happens to be my subject. So I'll lock my focus on him and I'll lock my exposure on him, and I won't worry about the window because you can't have it all. Right? You got to find that happy medium between exposure, and there you have it. So I picked my exposure point and my focus point, and like I said, in some sense, it's just pointing and shooting. This is just about showing you what it might look like in Hipstamatic, and Hipstamatic, in order to change it, it's a little bit more of what you see is what you get, which you can see there. There's no way in particular apps that you can actually control the exposure and focus. So the only way to do that would be to reposition your camera, much like I did, and reframe it and look at your viewfinder to see what the exposure's like. Right? So I like to think there is no bad light, only the wrong light for a particular subject. Right? This is 155. If you follow any photographic book that tells you the best times for light, which they are certainly correct, early morning, late afternoon, best possible times to be out and be shooting. But that doesn't mean you can't break the rules. It doesn't mean you can't be out at the other times finding subjects that are appropriate for that light. Silhouettes in a big city, downtown, this is the appropriate light at 155 for this particular subject, and this little mini story I'm trying to tell here is a good example of that. Now, if I had an assignment to photograph the president, a celebrity, or a CEO at this time in this light, this would not be the appropriate light for that subject. I would find other ways to photograph them in the open shade or bring some artificial lighting, etc., etc. But just a little kicker in there, a little word to remember that these are not hard and fast rules. Photography is about being creative, and mostly for me, I think it's about being playful. So let's not crop. Instead, let's zoom with our feet. My point here is never use the mobile zoom feature on any camera. They're horrible. They basically just zoom in on the pixels, and ultimately, in the end, your picture just looks worse. So what you want to learn to do, and Robert Capa, famous photographer, if you don't know him, you should look and study his work, famously said, if your pictures aren't good enough, you're not close enough. And I believe that with all my heart. Some of the best pictures, especially mobile images, you need to be right up in the action. Find the best way, the most comfortable way for you to get close to people, get close to the action, and it doesn't even need to be people. Whatever your subject is, you want to be close to that subject. You want to be right up on it. It's going to tell a stronger story, a better story when you're closer. So try not to crop your images, and try and, as I say, zoom with your feet. Get close to that. It's going to make you funny enough, I think a better human being and a better photographer. And I mean by better human being because you're learning to interact and judge personal space. And I think that makes us better photographers. It also invites conversation sometimes and invites interactions. So find the best way that's comfortable for you. There are a few exceptions. This is an exception. This is, I don't know, 10,000 feet, maybe more, maybe less, above the Bay Area as I'm landing into Oakland from Portland. And I have a zoom lens on my phone. That's right. So the exception is if you have what we call long glass or lenses or accessories that you can throw on your camera, the better. That's one way you can get close. I own this. I know it looks silly, but sometimes it's the right tool for the job, which is an extremely long telephoto lens for your iPhone. They exist. And that image you just saw was shot with that. So I couldn't zoom with my feet there, but there are ways around that. Also, I do want to point to the work of a real pioneer in mobile photography and in digital photography in general. Dan Chung actually took his vision and his passion to this recent Olympics and shot everything with his iPhone connected to some Canon binoculars. So those of you who in your mind may be thinking that the iPhone may have not been the right tool for the job, being sports, action, and Olympics, I may have tended to agree with you until I saw this beautiful work and some of his results, which you can find if you just Google Dan Chung and his Olympic blog. Some amazing stuff which further proves it's not really the device, it's the eye, the vision, the visionary behind it that makes that's more important than anything. Just some stunning images he was able to create. I think really blew the glass ceiling off the idea that an iPhone couldn't be used in sports. And another real visionary, real hero of mine is Brad Mangian, who just published a book called Instant Baseball. And it's his baseball Instagrams. He's a 20-year veteran of Sports Illustrated. They have published some of his Instagram mobile images in the magazine, and he has this beautiful book out. So just a plug, but also to prove that a serious tool, a tool in the hands of a serious image maker who has practiced with their tool, you end up seeing their creativity and what they can do with it really soar. So it can be a tool for many situations. We want to start talking about silencing that inner critic. And that's a good segue for me because sometimes the voice in our head, the photographic voice in our head tells us, oh, the iPhone isn't good enough, the mobile phone isn't good enough. Or even if that's not the voice in your head, the voice in my head really doesn't care what tool I'm using. I hear things in my head. The inner critic in me says, oh, you don't want to shoot that. The light's bad. The composition's bad. Oh, you've shot that a million times. You don't need to do that. That's the critic. Whatever barrier in your mind there is to not taking photographs, you need to learn to silence that. You want, the moment your head transmits that message to your heart, or your heart transmits that message to your head, that then transmits that signal to your finger that has you click or snapping a shutter, you want to honor that no matter what the situation is. Just shoot, right? So you want to silence that inner critic. You don't want to think, just shoot. That's a motto that I learned early from when I was shooting. It's a lomography movement, LOMO. Shooting with LOMO cameras, and their motto is don't think, just shoot. And I think that we want to keep that in mind as well, right? Silencing that inner critic, shooting when we want to shoot, trying to always be ready, and we want to take a picture, take that picture, right? We want to be thinking, of course, about exposure and light, all those things. But I think it's also important to just go over the top sometimes and just really shoot, just honor that feeling. I think it's an important feeling when we want to shoot a picture to honor it and shoot it, right? Along the same lines, one of the greatest photographers that ever lived, I'm sure you all know him by now. If not, you will know an image I will show of his shortly, I'm sure. But he said your first 10,000 photographs are your worst. I tend to believe that. I am on a journey to get to 10,001, and hopefully that 10,000 in first photograph won't suck as much as the rest of us. And I think that goes along ways towards silencing the inner critic, not thinking and just shooting. Let's get there. Shoot, practice, and have fun. Life balance is overrated. What do I mean by that? Take your phone, take your device, and one day, 1 hour, 1 week, 1 month, 2 months, just be completely consumed by your device. Have it with you all the time. Shoot every picture with it. Get used to it. Try every app that fancies you. Eat, sleep, and breathe mobile photography, light, whatever aspect you want to get better at. Forget everything else. Somebody else will pick up the kids from soccer. Don't worry about it. No, I'm just kidding. But you know what I mean. Be consumed by something for a little while, even if it's an hour. I do think we tend to be a little attention deficit. We have our attention span in terms of, and I'm speaking mostly for myself, but I can't be alone here, in that I jump from one thing to another, to another, to another. I think the internet and social media is changing the way we think about those things, and certainly this is a caution to not only slow down, but focus on something that you're most passionate about and really dive deep into it. Don't just stay in the shallow area. Go deep. Go down to 9, 12, 15 feet in something you're studying. So no matter what aspect of it is, just overindulge in that aspect of photography, at least for a little while. And you've got to be ready. You've always got to be ready, because a moment happens in an instant. And if you're not ready, you've lost it. There is no moment there. It's only going to be in your mind's eye, which for some may be perfectly acceptable. For others, such as myself, who are really passionate about capturing these fleeting moments, I always want to be ready. So here's a few tips and tricks. One is, and some of you will gasp, but turn your auto lock off. So if you have a password on your phone, at least when you're shooting, I happen to have mine off all the time, but just go into general auto lock settings on your phone and check the never. That way, when your phone is on and you're shooting, it won't go to sleep, if you will, and bring that auto lock password up that you have to retype, because by that time, the moment's probably gone. And don't forget, you've got that little camera icon next to the slide unlock button that gives you immediate access to your camera quickly. The other thing is, when you're done doing something non-photographic on your phone, let's say you pick up your phone, you check your email. I've checked my email, and you're ready to put your phone to sleep and put it in your pocket or hold it in your hand. Don't do that. Check your email. Whenever you're done doing anything non-photographic on your phone, right? Check your email, then, or whatever it is, then launch your favorite camera app, and then put your phone to sleep. That way, when you slide to unlock, the first thing that launches isn't your email, isn't your home screen, but your favorite camera app, and you're ready to shoot. So shoot anything and everything that moves, right? That will help you be ready. I have a rule that I shoot any pigeon or bird that flies by me. Anytime, anywhere, except when I'm driving, of course. For practice, right? Just for practice, to prove that I'm ready, right? And to see if I can't hone my sensibilities in terms of timing. During the summer, when there's a lot of little varmints out and about up in the Oakland Hills, my dog and I, that's Vincent again, he loves to chase and jump after these things. He'll do it 5 or 6 times on a walk every day. And I don't miss an opportunity to make a photograph to hone my sensibility of timing and always being ready. Right? Here's another thing. Shoot from the heart. I mean this both figuratively and literally. Okay? Here is a great way to make your snapshots of family barbecues, of birthday parties, of street photography, of just about anything a little better. And that is not to hold your phone in the traditional position that looks like you're taking a photograph. Because what happens when you do that, the situation always changes. People, oh, they get the signal, photograph, photograph. They get stiff, they put on the fake smile. Bring your camera down, and I'll show you. I think I have a picture here. So on the left here, you're seeing me bring my camera up to the position that most of us want to shoot a picture in. The moment you do that, look at that. That's the universal symbol for I'm taking a picture. But look on the right here, when you bring your camera down to your chest or your heart area and you shoot and tap from there, look at where my eyes are. I'm able to look. I'm able to smile. I should have been smiling in that picture. And interact with the subject. And you know what I'm doing at that time? I'm snapping away with my thumb. Pop, snap, snap, snap. And it relaxes people, disarms people. Most of the time they don't know. It works great with kids, right? So shoot from the heart. Bring it down. You're gonna give up a little bit of control because your compositions are gonna be not as perfect because you don't have at eye level. But you got to practice with that. You can get really good at that. You can get really good at tilting your phone forward or backward to kind of shoot better spontaneous, candid shooting from the heart. So there's a tip there. We got to talk a little bit about composition because mobile photography is just photography. It's about photography. It's about light, which we talked about, and it's about composition. Those are the things that make good photographs, not filters, not good glass or lenses or $5,000 camera bodies, right? It's composition, it's lighting. Let's not forget, if we go back to the history of photography, photography is basically a box with a hole in it, right? I mean, that's all you need to make good pictures. Won't belabor that point. Actually, I will probably beat that dead horse a few more times. Composition, energy, and directed attention, right? So we're going to talk basically a little something you can do more research on if you want, the rule of thirds. But the basic concept is you can, and most camera apps have a grid you can turn on. And when you turn on that grid, if you've ever wondering what that grid was for, the PowerPoints that are highlighted here in red are the most pleasing areas to put your subject. So think about that, right? Put your subject in that area, and Mother Nature tells us that that is going to be a pleasing area for our eye and composition. Basic rule of thirds, right? Works for square, works for non-square, black, it doesn't matter. Turn the grid on, put things in one of those crosshairs, if you will. Let me show you a little. That's composition, basic composition using a grid, using the rule of thirds. Let me show you what that would look like in terms of using directed attention. Oh, before I do that, I have another slide, which I want to talk another rule of thirds. Some of the best photographs, no matter what they are of, they can be food, latte leaves, anything, street photographies, people, pictures, portraits. If you can have three elements in there, remember we're talking about the rule of thirds. Here's another rule of thirds. Foreground as one, middle ground, and background. I like to think of that as layering. And the more layering, and you can, of course, have more than three, at least three gives you a good sense of composition and interest, if you will. So think about three, not only the rule of thirds, but putting thing in thirds. Think about something in the foreground, something in the middle ground, and something in the background. Those will always elevate no matter your photographs, no matter what the subject matter. Directed attention. I wanted to say, most of the cameras most of us have been shooting with have been center weighted, center focused. The focus point's in the middle. The exposure is generally center weighted. And I think that has tended to have us throw all of our subjects in the center of all of our frames. And what we want to do is think about, for example, here. If I apply the rule of thirds, right, she's in the center, which is oftentimes the default for us. Well, let me go ahead and move her into one of these four areas, okay? So we say, oh, composition pleasing, okay? But what we're lacking now, and even if I go to the next one, we can put her in the bottom one, is her sense of direction. Now, if you're old school print like I am, she's almost leading you off the page, if you will. That's very old school. So if I moved her in the other areas of the PowerPoints, right, This is better. Not only is it better composition, but her attention, her direction is better. It looks like she's going to be walking into the dark area of the frame. Oop, wrong way. Here we go, right? So we can see how this composition of all the 4 points might be the strongest points because of her sense of direction. And of course, I love quotes. Hell, there are no rules. We're trying to accomplish something here. So know the rules, then break the rules. Basic little composition tool. Post-production, finding your visual voice. This is going to be fun and exciting. I'm going to do a little trick here, and I'm sure it's going to work. A little technological wonder. Finding your visual voice. It's all very, very important to not just snap the picture and take the picture, but to do a particular level of post-production. Post-production can be as simple as putting a frame around it. It could be as simple as boosting the contrast or the exposure just a bit. You don't have to go over the top, although you can approach this with a very artistic hand and do collages and photo manipulations. I'm going to keep it a little bit more towards the photojournalism and the journalist sensibilities in terms of post-production, but I want to show you something here. But before I show you, let's not forget, I do not believe that filters make bad photographs better, right? Lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig, right? A filter does not make it. It may make it more aesthetically pleasing because of the color tone, but what we're reacting to in a photograph like that are the colors and the tone, not the photograph. A photograph with poor lighting and bad composition with an Instagram filter on it is not going to make that look better, right? We need to concentrate on the things we're concentrating on, right? Are the subject matter. That's what's most important. In this grid you're looking at, the most important subject here, the most important thing is a wonderful moment, a wonderful sense of composition, not so much the filter, right? And my basic rule is filter the minimum amount as possible, and I think that your images will really sing. It becomes more about the image and the subject and less about too many filters. With that said, I'm going to show you my process, but you should understand that my intentions, my photography, are really about trying to mimic what you're seeing here on the left. That's my artistic vision, is to have my digital photographs look torn and worn and stepped on and, locked up in the attic for, a million years. But it's also part of my photographic history. The image on the right is the very first image I took when I was 14 years old. Is the very first person in an image. And that's taken with a 4x5 camera. What possessed me at that point to take that negative and scratch that negative and then print out a contact sheet and color it with colored pencils, I do not know. But those are my roots of photography. So this is all to explain that my particular sense of style, what I'm going for in post-production, is a little bit of grit, a little bit of grunge, a little bit of grime, a little bit of analog, and a little bit of borders, a little bit of trying to bring those sensibilities into my photograph. So I'm just going to show you how I do that. And the one thing I want to do is break away here just for a second, and hopefully this will work. I'm almost sure it's going to. I've tried this many times in preparation for this. And voila, in 1, 2, and 3, you are seeing my iPhone. And got my fingers crossed this will go glitch free. It's probably going to have a little bit of a lag, but that's okay. I'll try and go slow here. So I'm going to show you an image that I took recently. This is a color image. Normally I shoot most of my images in straight color. This is down in LA as I'm sitting on a metro train going back to the airport. And I'm going to show you how I bring that sensibility as an example to encourage you to play with apps, to get to know apps and get to know your sense of style and what you're comfortable with and what certain apps can do, because that's going to also get you a long way in terms of style and finding your own style. So the first thing I'm going to do is start applying different filters. I tend to work in what I call something called app stacking, which is I really like to bring images in, as you're seeing here, into several different editing apps and use a particular feature of that app that I love, and then bring it into another app. So I love Camera Plus's clarity filter. And I also now am going to make this black and white. So I've added a little bit of sharpness, if you will, and then I've converted it to black and white. Now I'm done with this particular app. And so I'm going to go ahead and close it here, and I'm going to save it to my camera roll. And then I'm going to start bringing in just a little bit of grunge. I like an app called Wood Camera to start it off. You can see I was already practicing here. Let's go ahead and close this one. Bring that in again from my camera roll. We will see it right here. And we're done. We can bring it in. And we'll take this one here and we'll edit it. And we'll go right to, I'm not going to, I can be really, really obsessive about this and can work on an image for up to an hour, finding just the right amount of grunge and texture. So I'm going to just kind of do this quickly. I love the texture intensity here. So you see it added some little bits of spot and grunge up in the sky there, which I like. I'm going to take that down just a bit. Let's say done there. And let's go ahead and save this back to the camera roll. And I might do this with different apps, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 times, maybe once, maybe twice. And once we're done there, I'm going to open up another new and recent app. If you haven't checked it out, you should. That's called Mextures. I'm going to start over, and we'll get the last one we saved, which is right here. And we'll crop this one. And I'm just going to put a formula on this one. We've got the formulas here in Mextures, and I'm going to pick one of my favorites here, old icons, and bam, oh my, see, that looks like a taxi just ran over it. I love it. And again, this is just how I do things, just really just encouraging you to play, find your own voice, find your own passion. You may be color, but apps and playing around with apps are really, really important because you get to know them. You get to know what they can do for you and how you may want to use them. And the last thing I might put on this would be probably a border, and I might go into Snapseed to do that. You can see I've already put the border on that here, and then that might be my final save from here with this little subtle border around it. And that would be it. So, and you can also see here once my screen stops flickering, here all my go-to apps right now here on the first page. So we're going to go ahead and get out of this and get back to the presentation. And there we go. Great. So we kind of went from left to right, learning to play a little bit in post-production and apps so that you can learn to get the style that you want and you're used to. And again, it could be more plain, it could be less plain, right? But ultimately, one of the secrets, I think, is the secret to great storytelling really is editing. And something I like to think about, let it bake and cut off the ends. Let it bake means after you've had a photographic experience, maybe you've just taken a bunch of pictures on a trip or of a birthday or out on the street doing some street photography, don't immediately begin posting. You want to put them in the oven and let them bake a little bit. Get a little bit of distance between your images and the experience of taking the images. Because oftentimes, I can remember as a photojournalist specifically how I would get so tied to images for all the wrong reasons. I remember one time literally hanging out probably an 18-story rooftop to get an overall of a protest. And just because I had done that, I was so tied to that being the image I wanted on the front page. And yet it was probably not the best storytelling image. And so try and move yourself, distance yourself away just a little bit before posting and sharing your images. So let it bake. And the other thing I like to think about is cut off the ends. And that's really about editing, right? Remember the sandwich you make for your kids or the one you loved when you were a kid? You know, your mom, your father, they cut off the ends for you. They edited that sandwich, if you will. So sometimes you want to do that. I'll talk a little bit more about that specifically here. On a recent trip to Hanoi in Vietnam, my camera roll, when I was done, I took 663 pictures. I let them bake for about a week or so, and I edited those down to 118 images. And ultimately, the only images that I will show people or publicly share are about 12 images. So I've really cut off the ends there. And I am really a big proponent of a real secret to storytelling, and the power of storytelling is to edit, right? Make your pieces as short as they can be. Only show your best stuff. Really put your best foot forward. And I think that goes a long way to strengthening whatever story you're trying to tell, right? So you really want it to be the best stuff. So here are just a few images from that trip, right? Just to show you. These, in my opinion, were my best images. I was thinking about just telling a simple story, if you will, about what Hanoi felt like to me. I love this image because anybody who's been there, the streets are chaos, but there's order in the chaos. And this was one particular moment that showed that. The last image had a very kind of traditional feel to me that I thought was important to show. I absolutely love this kind of reflection that was going on. Another kind of mixing of old culture there on the street. Just a wonderful, quiet, reflective, meditative moment. Again, Hanoi and downtown Hanoi, where we were staying, there's a lot of uniformed folks. So it wasn't always so serious. There were lighter moments. I loved kind of capturing and playing with that. There were some really mysterious moments as fishermen looked almost like they were floating out or walking on water, standing on these little jetties. And that was about it, right? So of 663 images, I could have gone over the top and shared with you 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 and posted a bunch on Instagram or Room or any other social media. But I think that editing and drilling things down to their essence as best you can is really going to strengthen your storytelling. So let's begin to close it up here with a little homework, right? This is called Keep Calm and Do Your Homework, right? So becoming a better mobile storyteller, right? Try this. So here's some homework. See if you can go one day shooting every time your inner voice says, I'd like to take a picture of that. You walk outside, you're going to work, you see a beautiful light falling on one of the flowers in your garden. I'd love to take a picture of that. Do it. See if you can go one day. See if you can go 1 hour. Honoring that inner voice that tells you to take a picture. Now, for me, that was very hard in this situation because as a photographer for over 20 years, I have more pictures of raindrops on windows than I care to even admit. But there I was waiting for my daughter to pick her up from school. I looked, it was raining. There was some raindrops on the driver's side window. I shot a picture, waited for her. And this little scene transpired because I was ready. Then a woman comes out, you can see up here in the top grid center, and kind of puts her hands out like, oh, it's raining. And then eventually my daughter comes in, gets in the car, and somebody with an umbrella walks by, and I shot it. Not the greatest picture in the world, but it goes towards talking about practice, talking about being ready, talking about honoring your feelings no matter what happens. All right, so here's another assignment. See if you can take 20 images of one thing from different angles. Let's go back to that bowl of grapes on your kitchen table, right? Try and take 20 images of that from different angles and see what you can learn about the power of observation and the power of light. I chose a wall in San Francisco. So I took 20 different pictures of one thing, being that wall, from 20 different angles. Here's a digital proof sheet, if you will, of that situation and some of the ones I particularly liked from that situation. Another assignment or brief to give yourself, but ultimately have a goal. You can only score if you have a goal. So you have to know what you want to see before you can see it. So go out one day and say, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm just going to shoot anything that's the color red. Or I'm just going to shoot men in hats, or I'm going to shoot men in suits, or I'm going to shoot women wearing floral patterns. Whatever it is, give yourself a personal assignment where you know what you want to see, right? And follow those instincts. A really, really, really fun assignment. Now, most of you, like I said, you have to have a goal in order to score. I have a crazy obsession of gentlemen in hats. If anybody's wearing a fedora or anything other than a baseball cap within 2-mile radius of me, I will find them and I will photograph them. But it's a goal. It's something I'm looking for, and it can help, especially when I'm aimlessly walking the streets looking for pictures. I say, oh, there's a person in a hat. Let me just follow that and see where that leads. I'm just randomly walking anyway. And that happened in one particular case. Here's an actual proof sheet. The great app I love called 36, and it actually will give you a proof sheet like this. And I'm going to just deconstruct this for a minute. We're going to start here in the upper right corner with frame 1, and I'm just saw something in the reflection there. Then we'll go down to frame 2. Oh, I see a white hat in there, right? Oh, let me work that hat. I love hats. Then I come down to frame 3. Oh, the hat's gone, but there's a woman with white hair, and she's reflecting because of the black silhouette I'm making. Then we get down to frame 4. Things are happening again. Oh, there's the woman in the hat. She's back standing next to her friend. If I move my camera down a little bit here in frame 8, oh, it really pops them out a bit. And then, oh, here comes somebody walking by with their kid. And then a woman walks by down here, frame 10, which is framed in yellow and red. And all of a sudden, here's this image that comes together, a reflection that got Koci, meaning it got run over by a taxi and filtered just a bit to be a little gritty and have a little bit of a border there. So that's the idea of having a goal. It's a really fun assignment to put yourself out there and just photograph one thing or give yourself a goal and follow it. And ultimately, these are all experiments. So you've got to love your experiments, love these photographs as you would an ugly child, an ugly pet. We all know they exist, but we love them anyway because they're ours, right? So get out there, experiment, and have fun. The last part of the homework is to study the work of others. They don't have to be famous photographers, but it's a great place to start. They've been culturally and socially anointed, if you will, most of them rightfully so, in their place in the pantheon of great photographers, and their work in terms of how they use light and moment and composition are definitely worth studying. If you need a starting point, you don't have to look too far. I love this little comic that proves to me there is Wi-Fi in heaven. The comic says he won't come in until he finds out if we have Wi-Fi. But clearly they do, because you can even follow Cartier-Bresson, who's taking pictures up from the great beyond. So you can find him on Instagram and follow him. Or more importantly, you can follow and find the work in your local library or online of Cartier-Bresson, Helen Levitt, Saul Leiter, my favorite of all time, Roy de Carava, Gary Winogrand, William Klein, Vivian Mayer, another recent wonderful discovery, or any category of photography you love, be it landscape or commercial work. Find the masters, find the greats in there, look at their work and be inspired by it. Finally, this is a little hat tip to Josh Johnson, who planted this seed in my head about really sharing your work once you've edited it, and you've cut off the ends, and you've given it a little bit of style and thought, and you're ready to share that work and share it with the community and be part of this kind of social photography movement, which I think is very important to get your work out there. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3 to get followers, to get community, and to get involved. And one is post an image, genuinely like 2 images somewhere, be it Google Plus or wherever you're looking at images, and comment on at least 3. And a comment is a real comment, which describes why you like the image. Not thumbs up, emoticons don't count, and one-word comments like wow, great, awesome, killer. Those don't cut it. There's a little example here of a genuine comment that I left on a really brilliant photographer called 100 million on Instagram. And I told him why I like this image. And I said here, it says, the tone here is so inviting. It's such a beautiful composition. And I love the tension between the two men and how even their body language and their arms are mimicking or nearing each other. Or for me, to the circles on the door, such strong element. Absolutely love this frame, right? That was a comment of me trying to express myself in terms of this image. Very, very important. Using this 1, 2, 3 rule, you will gain followers, you will gain conversation, you will gain friendships. So get out there and share these images, share these experiments, share these ugly pets of yours. Not all of them. Edit. It'll make your storytelling a lot stronger. Keep calm, and these are the final takeaways. Be prolific. Try and make it, as Cartier-Bresson once said, your first 10,000 images suck, are your worst. Make it to 10,001. But remember, edit. We don't need to see all 10,000 of your ugly children. Keep calm and be ready. Be ready. You want to make sure that when your mind says shoot, when you're doing that assignment, you have no excuses like, oh, my camera's in my purse, my pocket, or you didn't even have it around, right? Experiment with, if you're not into mobile photography, get into mobile photography and go one day with only shooting pictures with your mobile device and see the opportunities, the inspiration, the joy, the fun that you can have with that particular tool. Keep calm and practice, practice, practice. It sounds elementary, but it's so true in terms of getting great mobile photographs, getting great photographs in general. You've got to practice exposure, practice with the tool, because when you master your tool, be it an app, no matter what the tool is, your creativity soars, and that's where we're all trying to get. Give yourself assignments and deadlines. I've given you a little jump start here, but with personal assignments and personal deadlines, you will begin to master whatever tool you have in your hand and become the visual storyteller that you want to be. Thanks again. I had fun being here, doing this, talking about one of my loves of mobile photography and storytelling. Keep coming back. There are more before this. There'll be more after this. Take care. Go out and shoot and make better photographs.